Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Grace Lamont, the American Center Director at the U.S. Embassy, Abuja. It's my pleasure to co-anchor today's program, Speak with a Diplomat, alongside my colleague, Ms. Josephine, who will be moderating the question and answer session. So today we're delighted to host another edition of one of our signature American Spaces program, Speak with a Diplomat. This is a monthly interactive session that connects Nigerians with U.S. diplomats serving across the country. It provides an opportunity to learn about their work, experiences living both in the United States and abroad, and their personal journeys into diplomacy. It also gives you, the audience, a chance to ask non-policy questions and have open conversations with our guests. Our guest today is Joseph, fondly known as Joe Giblin. Joe, thank you for joining us and for taking time to speak with young Nigerians across the country. So I'll begin by reading Joe's bio as brief introduction. After that, he will share his reflection on today's topic, which is my experience as a diplomat. Then following his remarks, we'll open the floor for questions from our audience, which will be moderated by Mrs. Josephine. We're excited to have participants joining us from 28 American spaces across Nigeria, including some of our social media platforms. And they'll be part of this conversation as well. So Joe is Deputy Economic Counselor at U.S. Embassy, Abuja. He most recently served as Chief of the Economic Unit in the U.S. Embassy, Dakar. Prior to that, Joe has served in Matamoros, Mexico, Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and Bogota, Colombia, as well as 2 separate domestic tours with the Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs in Washington. Joe holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Fordham University. He was commissioned as a reserve officer with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, later transferring to the Judge Advocate General, JAG Corps, following his graduation from New York Law School. Joe worked for several years as an attorney in private practice in New York City, then volunteered for active duty due to the events of September 11, 2001. Joe's active duty military tours include serving with the multinational force Iraq in Baghdad, the Army Operations Center at Pentagon, and the legal staff at what was then Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C. He retired from the Army in 2009 as Lieutenant Colonel. The same year, he joined the State Department. Joe has been married to his wife, Ellen, for over 30 years. Ellen is working in American Citizen Services at the embassy. They are both from New York City and have an adult son, Matthew. In Nigeria, when we see a military man or a retired military man, we salute you and say, "Sean, sir." So we extend that to you, Joe. So over to you, Joe. Please go ahead and tell us about your experiences, and then we'll take over from that. Thank you, and welcome once again.
Thank you so much for that great introduction. If anybody has questions at any point along the way, I'm pretty sure there's some way that you could either put something in the chat that'll catch my eye. I have the chat open here, or you just wave your arms and hopefully I'll see you on the dashboard here. But I've had very interesting times. I've been very blessed. My life has been blessed with a lot of good luck. But I want to pass along some of the things I've learned that I wish I had been told earlier on. It might have guided my actions more efficiently. I've had, as you've heard, I've had 3 different careers already. One in practicing law in New York City, one with the Army, and now this with the State Department. It's been fascinating and interesting at every step of the way. So making the transition from the military to State Department was especially interesting. And I want to just share one story. I was on military duty, on active duty in Baghdad, Iraq in 2004. And it was, if you were alive back then, I don't know how young everybody is in this group. It was it was a very active time there. There were bullets flying, as I say. I was waiting for a helicopter to go from one side of the city to the other. I was in uniform. I had a helmet on. I had a protective vest with a bulletproof plate in it, front and back. I had a loaded pistol. And the man in front of me on line, waiting for the same helicopter, was dressed like this. And I said, "What are you doing here? This is crazy. There are bullets flying around and you're dressed in a business suit?" And he says, "Well, I'm with the State Department." Wow, that's so interesting. How do you get into the State Department? How does that work? And he said, "Well, you go online and you do this and you do that. And there's a written test, there's an oral exam. You have to wait on the list. There's a whole security clearance." And he got to the end of the story and I said, I think you left something out." He said, "What?" I said, "Well, who do I have to know in order to get in?" He said, "You don't have to know anybody. I don't have to know anybody." That sounded strange to me because coming from New York City, if I wanted to get my car fixed, I needed to know somebody. So he told me, "You just go online," and that was it. So that stuck with me. That kind of egalitarian access to the job made it especially attractive. That it would be open to all comers, as opposed to being limited to who you knew, which was, as I mentioned, very common in New York City. So I went through that process when it came time, not right that day, not that year, but when it came time for me to think about another career after the Army, I put in my application. I did exactly what he said. I went online, and sure enough, everything worked out for me in the end. And I'd like to share that story because it's important to have that kind of access, at least in the United States, from all walks of life, from all socioeconomic groups, in order to represent America to the world. And in the United States of America, at least up till now, we don't take our oath of office to an individual or to a particular person in the government. We take our oath of office to defend the Constitution of the United States. So, regardless of what political party you are, regardless of what your political leanings might be, we all pull together in support of the Constitution and all that it warrants. So that was how I got into the State Department. Um, Once in, it was an interesting transition to go from the military to the State Department, to go from a directive kind of way of doing business where you're being told exactly what is necessary to much more of a consensus-based way of proceeding. I remember one particular job I had when I was in Bogota, Colombia. I had a leader say, "Have you considered this?" I thought about it and said, "Well, yeah, I did consider that. I didn't think it was appropriate because of A, B, and C." And then a day later, I said, you still haven't responded to my email." They said, "Well, have you considered this?" And they said the same thing all over again. And I realized at that point, they weren't asking me to consider it. They were asking me to do it. And that was a kind of a State Department way of saying, "Do it this way." So I was surprised, but it's all a matter of adopting the code of the organization that you're in. You have to promote that communication, and that was one of the ways that they did it in a less threatening manner than in the Army. In the Army, just like, "Do this." I said, "Do this," and that's that. So that was the cultural clash I experienced when I first got into the State Department. But I've been in for over 16 years now, and really had some fascinating assignments. Anybody have any questions so far? I'd love to entertain any questions at this point. Uh, I don't like to hear myself talk too much. It's much better if it's a two-way discussion. If you have a question,
All
just go ahead
right.
and open your mic. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, sir, for the introduction and for your brief opening. What is diplomacy? Because we
What is
have a lot of,
diplomacy?
yeah, we have a lot of young audience in our American spaces all over Nigeria. Some of them will like to know what is diplomacy in
Mm.
general terms.
Well, I mean, you could go to online dictionary and see what the exact definition is at any moment. I don't have it open at the moment, but I can say to me, diplomacy means in personal communications, expressing yourself in a way that's least likely to put the other on their guard. I once saw a T-shirt that said, "Diplomacy is telling a person to go to hell in a way that makes them look forward to the trip." I think that might be a little bit strong. I don't see those T-shirts for sale anymore, but I do think that diplomacy is in interpersonal relationships, just making sure that you're expressing yourself in a way that's not threatening, not abrasive, just trying to get to a particular communication, get your communication across, be understood in a way that's not going to have people put their shields up. In an international setting, it is two countries communicating in ways that do exactly that same thing, communicate in a clear way, in a way that doesn't cause the other to unnecessarily put up their shields, that doesn't create emotional content where not necessary. So you've probably said in your own personal communication, oh, that person's very diplomatic. Well, think about what you were thinking when you said that. What made them diplomatic? They said it in a way that was kind and gentle, and that might be part of it. So I know that the United States process of hiring diplomats actually tries to screen out people that are a little hard-edged or a little bit too tough-talking. And what we're left with are the people I've met in the State Department, incredibly nice as a group, incredibly nice. If you meet a not nice diplomat, that's very, very rare. And usually they're appointed, not work their way up through the ranks. So in any case, that's what diplomacy means to me. I hope that helps.
Yes, sir. So we'll be taking questions from spaces, but before then, I would like to ask, what lessons have you learned generally in the build up to your career as a diplomat? Maybe when you were in college, as you were, progressing
Mhm.
in your career. You told us that you've had like 3 careers. So we'd like you to share some of these things with our audience.
Well, one of the things I learned since coming into the State Department that I didn't really know before. I mean, everyone is different. That we all knew. But in what ways people are different, I think I started getting a real feel for that after I joined the State Department. We took a battery of personality tests that told us whether we incline more towards being an introvert, more towards being an extrovert, and on various levels of personality. So I was surprised to understand better that an introvert gains power, gains energy by being by themselves. An
Mm,
extrovert gains energy by being with other people. So we have two completely different styles of relaxation. I relax by being around other people. I'm much more extroverted. But introverts are exhausted by that. They don't necessarily hate people, but they need to recharge those batteries at times, and they need to be away from people for that reason. Now, I had actually heard that, watch out for those quiet ones. You never know what they're thinking. And that's the concept of what some extroverts think of introverts. So I think that really broke down a barrier in my mind about how to better work with all the different kinds of people that we run into around the world, right? Some of the things that I see in commonalities around the world, everybody in every country in the world has two really important things in their life: family and food. And if
Internet.
you could speak the language of family and food, I think you'll really go a long way towards breaking down barriers internationally. Uh, at the end of the day, and I think this was my biggest surprise about international diplomacy, at the end of the day, it's all about two people talking. And at some level, two people are talking, and whether they're communicating well or not will change the course of the bilateral relationship between two or more countries. And I was surprised at how much was driven by personality. So luckily, we've been very lucky in the diplomats that we have to express the viewpoints and communicate U.S. interests to the world.
All right. I think we have some questions on the chat box. So the first one says, how do you find transitioning from a military background where you take lots of order to being a civilian in the civil service?
It was very challenging at first. I had a boss who thought it was very funny. Every time he would come into my office, I would stand up and say, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Because you are my boss." I had been trained to do that my entire military career, and as soon as he stepped in, I jumped up, and he thought that was hilarious. He said, "You really don't have to do that." I said, "I really can't help it." So he'd come up to the office, and when I had my door open, he'd walk up to the doorway, but he wouldn't come all the way in. He would stand close to it, and he'd lean in a little bit, and then he'd lean back again, just to desensitize me from having to jump up every time he stepped in the room. And he'd just put one foot in. He was a man with a great sense of humor, and who really made me feel so welcome when I first joined the State Department. I'm very indebted to that gentleman, and he wasn't alone. He's joined by a lot of really nice other people in the State Department as well. So that was one of the transition moments for me. Not jumping up when my boss came into the room. I could feel the impulse in my body, and I was resisting it, and he appreciated it. It was a good time for all.
So we have another question on the chat box. What will your advice be for a young person that wants to pursue a career in public diplomacy?
Well, if you want to pursue a career in diplomacy in the United States, go online. That still exists. You could just go online, and it's accessible to all American citizens. So the first step would be doing your due diligence, right? Doing your research and seeing all there is to know about the process. And it's changed a little bit over the 16 years since I came in. I think they've added additional stage of writing some essays, but it's still the same. You still have to take a multiple choice test. By the way, the multiple choice test, one of the first stages of the test, I found to be incredibly fun. Now, if you like trivia, this is the test for you. What helped me a lot was that having been an attorney, when they asked questions, trivia questions, it seemed, about the Constitution, I had taken 2 semesters in constitutional law. So I was like, oh, I know what the 13th Amendment is. I know what the 10th Amendment is. So it was helpful to me to have that under my belt when I took that test. But that process is important to research. Now, once you delve into that process, you're going to find that there are 5 specializations within the general. You're considered a generalist as a Foreign Service officer, but within that generalization, you have to pick one of 5 cones, they call them. I chose the economic cone. There is also the political cone. There's a management cone, a consulate cone, and public diplomacy cone. Public diplomacy cone is more akin to the atmosphere that I'm in right now, getting messaging across to the public and managing the messages of all many social media and other communications. So each one is fascinating in its own way. Management itself is it's a microcosm of industry, right? They have to make an embassy independently survive, right? They have to buy all the fuel, they have to store all the water, they have to do all the things necessary to keep an embassy up and running, hundreds or thousands of miles away from Washington, D.C., where materials might be much more plentiful. So regardless of where they are, they still have to make sure that all those things are happening. Air conditioning, heating, the full gamut of services required for any living facility. So it's fascinating work. Now, I chose economics because I always thought in order to solve problems, it is very helpful to follow the money. You may have heard this before. If you follow the money, you start to understand things better. Where is the money going? For example, Nigeria is a very rich country. Where is all that money going? So we have a lot of interesting questions that I look at every day about movements of money and where it's going, where it's not going. So the solutions to those economic problems sometimes suggest themselves just by learning exactly what that money flow looks like and where it's generated from.
All right.
That may be more
Thank
than what the question required, but I threw in a little bit extra there.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Let me say to our participants in all our spaces, you can as well chat your question or you can raise your virtual hand. When we see you, we call you. So we have a question from Abeokuta Window on America. Says, what are the challenges that you face as a diplomat?
Every job has its own set of challenges. One of the challenges initially is getting used to being in a different place, different culture, getting uh, used to the place that you're in. You've heard the phrase perhaps culture shock. Some people go into a new culture and they're like totally amazed and they love it and they dive in with both feet and everything's great. And some people get to a culture like, oh, I feel very nervous about this. I'm going to stay home all the time. And people react different ways to different things. When I was leaving the United States, I had a lot of people say, hey, it's so difficult that you have to travel the world like this. Like, that's why I joined this field. I want to travel the world. I want to see things. So not everybody is the same, right? Some people want to be at home, want to be in a small neighborhood, like to lock themselves in, and other people want to travel more. And that's the category I found myself in. Um, Before I talk about the challenges, I'll just tell one thing about career advice, and that is the $1 billion question. When you ask yourself what you want to be for a career, sometimes the amount of money you make is a limiting factor. And the way to free yourself up from thinking too much about the money aspect of what you want to be when you start practicing your career is to ask yourself the $1 billion question. And that is, if you had $1 billion, not a million, $1 billion, you'd be super rich. That's $1,000 million. You could live off the interest and still have plenty left over. So if you had $1 billion, how would you spend the rest of your life? Not what would you buy? How would you spend your time? So that answer for me was I love to travel. But I've traveled without my family. I want to have my family with me. I want to be able to speak language so I can communicate with those around me. But even if you're in a country that you speak language, you have no connection to those people. I'd like to have a business connection when I get to someplace, so I have a reason to interact with the society in a way that is meaningful to them. And the more I started describing what I would do if I had $1 billion, the more I described the career I have now. It led me here. So I think that's an important lesson that I learned along the way. Now, talk about challenges. Not every move is an easy one. Sometimes I've been in some very difficult places in the world. Iraq was one good example. Another one was Matamoros, Mexico, where drug cartels really ruled that part of the country where I was. So it was those are some serious challenges. What saved us from all kinds of violence in Mexico, for example, was the fact that those cartels knew who we were, so we could be left alone. Somebody just wandering across the border into that part of Mexico from the U.S. side might really get themselves in trouble, kidnapped or worse. And they knew who we were and knew to leave us alone because they didn't want to start any trouble with the U.S. government. I thought that was a very odd situation to be in. But that was a challenge. That was a challenge. And seeing how the cartels ruled people's lives there, I was so glad that that wasn't going on at least as much. Inside the United States, there's still the rule of law, and it was heartening to know that our country had done so much better in that respect. So that's one challenge. There are many others. Taking a family around the world could have its own challenges. Finding the right schools for my son as he was growing up. These were all challenges. Some schools we were very successful at, some not so much. But overall, I think it was a positive experience for my family. So those are just some of the challenges. Now, actually, in the work itself, the major challenges are trying to achieve change. Any country I'm in, it's not my country. All I could do is communicate what we think is more appropriate in terms of action. It's usually very specific, one particular policy, one particular act, gesture, or movement, and change is achieved over time. It's very rare to have a sudden change in the absence of some upheaval. So those are certainly challenges in the course of our work as well. Hopefully that answered your question a little bit.
Yes, very well, sir. So we have a hand up in Calabar. Calabar, can you unmute and ask your question? Why Enugu will take over after Calabar? Sir, would you like to take the question one after the other, or we should take the questions
one after the
together?
other, please.
All right,
One
sir.
one after the other. Yes.
Okay. So Calabar, go ahead.
Good morning. It's been a very long time. It's good to see everybody.
Great.
Good morning, sir. My question is directed towards your actual job, which is an economic advisor or counselor. So, what is your thoughts about AGOA, which is the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act? We've seen that it has expired. It expired in September, and there's no discussions in the Congress or in Washington about renewing it. Instead, it's about it was a bad idea and it never should have happened. It gave too much preferential treatment to African countries and all of that. What do you think about this? And what are the plans for opportunities like that for African countries and young people in Africa to take opportunities for opportunities for work and all of that. So what do you think about that?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the question. Thank you very much. AGOA has been something that we've spoke about extensively, and you're right, it has expired this past September, I think is correct. And it's not dead, right? It's only expired. So there is discussion. There has been discussion about renewing it in what form and exactly how that's going to work. That's taking place at the highest levels of our government. Only Congress has the power to renew that. So if and when they do, we are prepared at the mission levels to implement whatever it is that they pass. So I can't guarantee which direction that's going to go in. I know that it had a lot of value. I also know that it was very underutilized in Nigeria before it expired. So that's something to also keep in mind. But I look forward to hearing the day that it has a final decision made on it. And thank you very much for bringing it up. If there's ever any movement on that, you'll be certain to hear about it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
so
you.
can we have Enugu? Please, can you unmute and ask your question? Go ahead.
I can't hear you.
You can sit down and ask the question. Speak to the mic.
It may be a mic issue on your side of
Yeah. Okay. You can chat the question. You can chat it. Tell director you want to chat the question to us because we cannot hear you. So
I'm so
we
sorry.
move to we move to Maiduguri. Maiduguri, please unmute and ask your question.
Good morning, sir. My question is, as an economic counselor, will you...
Wait.
Good
Go ahead,
morning,
we can
sir.
hear you.
As an economic counselor, could you share an example of a recent US-Nigeria partnership that has delivered measurable economic benefits, and what lesson can be drawn from future collaboration?
Wow, that's a great question.
Sorry, sir, just a second. This session is practically non-policy session. We just general questions that can, if you look at the topic, my experience as a diplomat, lessons for the youth. So it's a non-policy program. It's a program where we want you to learn from the wealth of experience of our diplomats that is presenting today. So as much as possible, ask questions that can benefit you as a young person in your career. Do you understand? Okay. So
Right now, if at all possible, if you could get your specific policy questions and we can have them
yeah.
reviewed and provide you answers later on, I'd love to be able to do that. But I appreciate that the scope of this particular interview is really just about much more general things. I love the economic question now. You may be a future economist. I could tell by the way you ask it.
All right. So let's Enugu, are you ready? Maiduguri, you can rephrase the question to your personal career,
Okay.
non-policy, please. Yes.
Okay.
Then you can come back and let's have our guest answer your question this morning. So
Okay.
Enugu, your mic is it up
Just
or are you
changing.
chatting it? Okay. So let her ask her question. No.
I'm not sure what's going on.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
There's a
You
failure on
might have
sound.
to chat it. You might have to chat the question. Just chat it on the chat box. We'll pick it up from there. So, sir, we go back to the chat box. We have a question from Uyo Window on America. Good day, sir. My question is this: how do you handle scenarios where your personal bias contradicts your diplomacy role to a particular country?
That also is an excellent question. Right from the outset, when we were in initial training in the State Department, it is drilled into us that regardless of what you may think, your job as a diplomat is to represent U.S. policy overseas. So as long as you're not doing anything illegal or immoral, it is your responsibility to represent that policy and do it in a way that's professional and represents it honestly and forthrightly. So if I had any bias against a particular policy, I don't think it's a good idea, or I would never express that to the public. The reason I'm speaking to the public about any particular policy is because they want to know what the United States thinks. They might ask me what I think, but they really want to know what the United States thinks. So if anyone asks me, what do you think about that policy? Like, it's not about what I think. It's about what the United States policy is, and this is what it is. So I think that is something that is important to know if you're going to practice diplomacy, because that is absolutely something that you need to keep in mind first and foremost when speaking to the public. Does my New York accent come out too much when I speak? I have a very strong accent being from New York City, and sometimes people tell me that makes it hard to understand. I hope
No,
that's
well,
not getting in anyone's way.
no, we can hear you and we understand you clearly, sir. So we have another question. What are some of the important skills young people should develop if they are interested in international relations or diplomacy?
Again, you've had really good questions, and I think more important than anything else is communication. Being able to communicate accurately, precisely through the written and an oral word. Words have meaning. And before I got into law school, I know I would say things off the cuff that approximated what I meant, but didn't always say specifically what I meant. So it taught me the importance of choosing the right words. For example, if you are dating a young lady and you say you have a good smell, that is different than saying, I love your scent. There are different shades of meaning to the way you express yourself, and it is important to do it in a way that gets that across most effectively. So I think communication is probably one of those most important skills. And that also goes for body language. You might say all the right things, but have this dubious face on when you're saying, like, I don't really believe what I'm saying. That would work against your message. So it is important to have a complete message, to do it in the right words, in the right written words, right oral words, and also with the right body language. and intonation. Have you ever talked to somebody who ends every sentence as if it was a question? And it makes you wonder, are they asking me or are they telling me? So there's some things about communication that individuals have to work on. There's a lot of people, and you've heard them all, that use a lot of ums and ers in their speech, and that can be very distracting. I didn't realize I was doing that until I started seeing my own words written down on the paper when I was doing depositions. Like, wow, is that what it looks like on paper? That's terrible. I need to get rid of that. So it took me a long time of practicing to get rid, and I still use them from time to time, but more often than not, I avoid them now successfully. So that helps with the communication. It's all these little tricks of the trade, but communication.
Yeah, great. Thank you, sir. So I have a question that seemed like that of the one Enugu sent. Says, I love the way you've moved from different careers. What were your strategies? The strategies you use in achieving that? Then is similar to what Enugu is asking. He said, good morning, sir. Thank you for the opportunity for this conversation. In terms of switching career paths, how will you advise a student in STEM?
Well, in my own experience, I can't say that I used strategy at every step of the way. The biggest decision I made was when I graduated from high school and I was offered a scholarship to college from the United States Army. So I had to make that decision right away. And it was when you're a kid, when they talk about years of obligation, that seems like a very long time. So I weighed that very carefully. And I decided it was worth the amount of time that they wanted in return. So I took that scholarship to college. I went to college for free. I would not have been able to do so had I not accepted that scholarship. My father had no money saved for any of the children. I was the oldest of 5 kids. He didn't have enough money saved for any of us to go to college. So we each had to do it on our own or not do it at all. And it was some luck on my part. I was blessed with the ability to be a good test taker, and that helped a lot. And so that was probably the most strategic decision I've made in my life after serving in the Army, and I knew I wanted to go to law school. That was just something I wanted to do and become a lawyer, right? So none of that was really especially strategic. I think the most strategic decision I made in my later life was to join the State Department, based on asking myself that billion-dollar question, which I had never heard when I was growing up as a kid. So that's why I pass it on now. I wish I'd known that earlier. But as far as switching careers for STEM, I struggled with switching careers. When I was first practicing law, it was not my favorite of my 3 careers. I was practicing law. I was getting into court a lot, and that was fine, but it was a constant battle, right? Every day was another battle in court. And at first, I enjoyed the strenuous, going back and forth and everything, but after a while, it wore me down, and I wasn't enjoying it as much. So I wanted to change, but I did not know how I could change careers without suffering a severe loss of income. And I was at that point in my career when an opportunity opened up in the Army to go on active duty. So I have been lucky. I can't say it was all strategic, but for STEM, that is a challenge. One of the good things about STEM, by the way, if you're thinking about changing careers within STEM, the logical thinking required to be a STEM major kind of carries for a lot of different careers. So many fields out there meander around it, right? When you write essays for a political science exam, or you write essays for a communications exam, some of those can wander around and land on the right answer from time to time, and you can pass and get a degree. But STEM requires logical thinking to a degree that's not required in all the other fields. So it's, in many ways, at least in the United States, more admired because it requires a high level of thinking in so many ways. So I've long been a great admirer of science. A lot of my hobbies are science oriented now, after my experience in the Corps of Engineers especially. So if you are in the STEM field and you want out of the STEM field, I mean, there's so many possibilities based on what what I see in this question. I think that the other fields respect STEM, and you would still be likely to be offered a job, at entry level, starting over in a different field. But if you could start over and be entry level, I think that certainly could work with a STEM background.
Thank you, sir. So we have Enugu, do you still plan to ask another question? So let me go to Bauchi.
Yes, ma. Good morning.
Hold on. Enugu, hold on. So Bauchi, after Bauchi, Uyo, then Enugu. Then we go back to the child boss. Go ahead, Bauchi.
Now, what did you learn that's very important through those careers?
What I learned that's very important to my careers?
What did you learn that are important through those careers?
Yes.
I think as you go through life, everything that you learn as you go through your careers is going to be helpful to you. I've never learned anything that didn't come in handy at some point in my life. Not a single thing. The more that you learn from what's around you, and there's an old saying that a cat that sits on a hot stove will never again sit on a hot stove, but it will never sit on a cold stove either. So the point of that old saying is to learn from your experiences, but make sure you learn the right lessons. Are you learning to stay away from all stoves and never go near them again? Or are you learning how to use them properly? So the experiences that you have can be learned in ways that you can't even imagine now. If you had a bad experience with a person, does that mean that that person and their whole family are evil? No, and it might just be that one day and that one time. My mother-in-law, I learned a lot from my wife's mother. Whenever someone cut someone off in traffic or did something that was considered rude or obnoxious, and it would make one of her children angry, she would tell a story about that other person, even though she'd never met them before in their lives. She'd say, "Do you know that that man had a dog who passed away yesterday, and he just is driving back from the cemetery after putting him in the ground? And how sad he is. He cut you off in traffic because he was crying so hard." And by the time she finished telling that story, even though you knew it wasn't true, you realized it could be. It could be. And thinking the best of all the people around you will make you a happier person, and it'll make you more productive in life instead of seething with anger at every little offense that comes your way. So if you make up those little stories about other people that shows that maybe you're just coming across them at a bad time if they do something that's considered wrong to you, that might be a better way of living. So I'll just throw that out there. I think that's a life lesson that might be helpful here. And thank you for your question. Now, you look to be younger than the rest of the people in the room. I love the fact that you're there today. Thank you very much for participating.
Uyo, you can unmute and ask your question. Yes.
My question is, how can young people contribute to diplomacy and international relations, even if they are not in a traditional diplomatic role?
Fantastic.
Right. We have very few people under 18 in traditional diplomatic roles, so that's absolutely true. One of the things that I did when I was younger is that when I met somebody who was in a field that I wanted to know more about, I wanted to be a lawyer when I was very young. So I went and I knocked on the door of a local law firm. And I said, "I'd like to ask you questions about becoming a lawyer." And the older gentleman who worked there was so surprised at that. Nobody did that. He invited me in, and he made an appointment for me. And I came back at the appointment time, and he sat down and he answered all my questions about what it took to become a lawyer, what he liked most about it, what he hated the most about it. And I learned a lot from that experience. So for you at your age, I think the best thing for you to do is just seek out those who have if you're interested in diplomacy, seek out those who have the most diplomatic roles in your community. Any local community leaders, see how they handle the various problems that come their way. Inevitably, at a higher level of social organization, you have people that need to mediate disputes. And that is always at the heart of every organization. Like one person wants A and the other person wants B. And how do you get them to agree on something that works for everyone? And that's very challenging. And you can learn a lot from the people who do that on a daily basis in your own communities. So I would say if you want to know more about diplomacy, if you want to support diplomacy in the future, learn about it in your own community and see how you can make that work on a larger stage as you go to older. So good luck to you. That's a great question. Thank you very much for that one. Another good young person question.
Yeah. So we have Enugu, you can ask your question now. Your second question.
Enugu, I thank you for your patience. You guys are great.
All right. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Ma. All right. My
Good morning.
question is, my first question is, what is the role of a public diplomat in conflict resolution? That's the first one. The second one is, when you transited from the military to the state service, what have been your greatest challenge that made you wish you were in the military, and how did you come out of it? What were the decisions you take, and how did you come out of it? And then the last question is, the first time you came into Nigeria, what was your greatest challenge, and what captivating thing in Nigeria you find fascinating?
All right. You're going to have to remind, I didn't realize there were going to be so many questions. I would have taken notes.
Wow.
But I will say, let me start with the last one. When I came to Nigeria, my biggest challenge was how little I'm able to get out and around this country. And that the reason for not being able to travel out and around is security. We have people who study the security situation of the entire country and tell me, okay, you can go safely within this circle or this shape, whatever shape they draw, but you're not allowed to go outside of that area without special permission. And that special permission also comes with special equipment and bodyguards and everything else. So what surprised me was, and what challenged me is how hard it is to get outside of that, we call it the bubble, right? Trying to get outside the bubble. And inside of the city of Abuja, within certain confines, not even the entire city, we're allowed to travel freely, but outside those lines, we're required to get special equipment and whatnot. Even just to go to the airport requires armored vehicle and all kinds of other security considerations that I didn't realize were necessary before I came in. In fact, this is a true story. We actually got attacked between Abuja and the airport one day. So we were very lucky to be in an armored vehicle, not with firearms or anything, but it was an attack with another car and trying to get money, I suppose. But it was very upsetting and very concerning. So the security aspects of living in Nigeria, I think, were the biggest challenge that I've faced so far. Because in order to do business, I'm here for economics, right? You want to do business, you have to have security as a prerequisite. There's an old saying that money is a coward. Wherever there is danger, it runs away. And I think you've seen that in many parts of Nigeria, where it's the most dangerous is the least money. There's a reason for that. So that's, I think, one of the challenges that I've faced here in Nigeria. So remind me what one of the other two questions was again?
Okay, the role of a public diplomat in conflict resolution, and then during your transition from military service to state service, what has been your greatest challenge that made you to wish you were still in the military, and how did you come out of it?
Okay. There have been days when I first started with the State Department that I was like, wow, I really wish I was back in the military, because in the military, it's directed. You are told this is what you need to do, and it's very clear, right? So it's a little bit more murky in the State Department. Sometimes it's up to you as to how you proceed, and it's not as clear cut. And if somebody says, let me give you an example. One of my very first jobs in the State Department, I was working in Washington, D.C. in bilateral trade affairs. And my boss said, okay, here's your portfolio. And they gave me a list of 12 countries. And they were spread out amongst the East Asia and the Pacific. And he said, you're responsible for the bilateral trade of these with the United States with these countries. Like, oh my gosh, that sounds like a crushing amount of responsibility for me. I just got started. I don't even know what to do yet. He says, well, what you should do is read everything that you can find about these, about the bilateral relationships trade-wise with these countries. And then the more you read, the more you'll understand. And the more you understand, the more you'll come to me with telling me what you need to do. And I was concerned because I didn't know if that was going to happen or not. What if I do all this reading and I don't come up with it? But you know what? That's exactly what happened. When I read everything I could and I spoke to all the players involved in it, and there's not just one agency involved in bilateral trade. There's the United States Trade Representative, the U.S. Department of Commerce. There's all these other agencies out there that are also working on the same thing. So by conferring with them and working together, I realized as a team we could do more together than we could individually. So I really felt like that was a breakthrough moment for me. And I never again said, oh, I wish it was in the Army instead. So that was a good day for me. The role of a diplomat in conflict resolution. Well, like anything else, it depends, right? It depends on the conflict and it depends on the situation. If there's active fighting going on, the role of both nations is to try to resolve that conflict, right? No nation in its right mind wants its young people to die in war. Nobody wants that. Now, how that's resolved, it's often found that a third party nation might come in and help mediate the dispute. Not always successful, but these are the methods that we use in order to try to resolve conflict. We have the UN Security Council, which also has the power to make pronouncements to some extent as well. And all these different agencies, international agencies, and the players themselves find those mediators that they find to be honest brokers of peace and try to work with them. Now, as you know, conflict will always be with us. There's conflicts going on around the world as we speak, but I absolutely think one of the first roles of diplomats is to help bring about peace so that we can let it follow with prosperity, right? It's only in insecurity where the money runs away. When a country is secure, money generally comes flowing in unless there's some other blockage to it. And I don't want to get into all the economic policy details of it, but there's a lot of good ways to make any nation prosperous. It's practically a list. You just go down a list of A, B, C, and D, and you will be prosperous. So it's there used to be a document published by the World Bank called Ease of Doing Business Report. They no longer write it for other reasons, but it was an excellent tool and a how-to list of how to make your nation prosperous. And they did one for every country in the world. So that, I think, is a great way to prevent conflict through increased economic relations. So hopefully that answers that question. Well, through all three questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We are totally we've totally run out of time. But I don't know, Maiduguri. Maiduguri, did you rephrase your question? I'll just give the last opportunity to you so we can round off because we have another program immediately after this one.
You still want to add something maybe different?
No. We just take Maiduguri. We are very sorry. We have a lot of program on the chat, boss. Salient questions. But I don't know, maybe if we get the answer, maybe we can post it to the group chat on American Spaces platform. If you're able to get the answers.
Hold on. Can she answer a question, please?
Yes, please. Quickly. 1 minute.
Quickly, please.
My question is, what inspired you as a lawyer and a military personnel to become a diplomat?
Should I say that one more time?
Right, one more time.
Okay. What inspired you as a lawyer and a military personnel to become a diplomat?
Well, for me, it was the answer to that billion-dollar question. When I realized all the things that I really wanted out of life, if I had all the money in the world, then that really brought me in this direction. And I've been very satisfied to have chosen this career. It's really helped me achieve things that I would not have been able to do otherwise. I didn't mention this earlier, but in so many countries, you are limited by what your parents have done. If your father is a carpenter, you will be a carpenter. If your father was a plumber, you will be a plumber. In my case, my father worked for the city of New York and collected garbage. That was his job. So if I lived in a society where I would be required to follow the steps of my father, I would have been collecting garbage also. So I'm so pleased and proud that I was able to take what I had available to me, take those opportunities, and be able to make the most of them. And I have to admit, a lot of it had to do with luck. I was not some, totally perfect young kid who knew exactly what was going to go ahead of him. I just grasped at the opportunities as they came my way, and I was lucky enough to become where I am now. But I am inspired every day to continue my job by people like you who are thoughtful, interesting, the future of your country. I welcome the opportunity after this to have questions, and I think there'll be a way of getting questions to me through the American Spaces here. I'd be happy to stay in touch with anybody who would like about any of the issues that concern them. So thank you all very, very much. This has been fantastic.
Wow, 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 wow. Can we please all unmute and just give him a round of applause? I want him to hear the sound of our clapping. So all faces, unmute, please.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. We've really learned a lot from you this morning. Very inspirational, very knowledgeable stuff that you have spoken about, sharing your personal experiences with us in the military, in public diplomacy, civil service. We really appreciate it, and we've learned a lot. And thank you to all our audiences also for your very important questions, very knowledgeable questions. Also, unfortunately, we are not able to take all, but I guess we've responded to most of it, and Joe has actually talked explicitly on some of the questions that we also have. So we always have records of this, and we can go back to them and still learn much more. We want to thank you for coming, Joe. We really appreciate your time with us this afternoon, and we hope that subsequently you will also be part of some of our programs for American Spaces, all our spaces across the country. We want to say thank you on their behalf. I'm saying thank you for your time this afternoon. Please feel free to exit. We're having another program, and so our audiences, please sit put for our 12 o'clock program on the life of Henry Ford, and thank you for your patience with us this morning. Joe, thank you.
Thank you all so much. This has been a real pleasure for me. I look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. See you at 12.